What if I told you that somewhere in a dusty antique shop in Prague, there sits a music box that knows things about you that you've never told anyone? Not just your name, not just your face, but your deepest secrets, your unspoken regrets, your most private moments of shame and desire. And what if I told you that this music box has been playing personalized songs for strangers for over 200 years? Songs that tell stories so intimate and accurate that most people who hear them never speak of the experience again. Today, I'm going to tell you about the Merivek Music Box, a device so disturbing that it's been banned from public display in 17 countries, and why the Czech government maintains a permanent guard outside the small shop where it currently resides. This is the story of an invention that was never supposed to exist, created by a man whose obsession with human consciousness led him down a path so dark that even death couldn't stop his work. The year was 1823. František Moravec was Prague's most celebrated clockmaker, known throughout the Austrian Empire for his intricate mechanical creations. But František harbored a secret obsession that went far beyond gears and springs. He believed that human memories, emotions, and thoughts were nothing more than mechanical processes that could be captured, studied, and replayed like the notes on a music cylinder. His workshop, located in the shadow of Prague Castle, became a laboratory where science and occultism merged in ways that would make even modern researchers uncomfortable. František spent years studying the recently published works on mesmerism and animal magnetism, convinced that human consciousness emitted a form of energy that could be mechanically harvested and stored. But František's interest wasn't purely scientific. His wife, Albaida, had died 3 years earlier from consumption, and in her final delirium, she had spoken words that haunted him. She described events from his childhood that he had never shared with anyone, memories so private, he had convinced himself he had forgotten them entirely. She spoke of his first love, his secret fears, even his dreams from nights when she wasn't there to witness them. The doctors dismissed her ravings as fever-induced hallucinations, but František became convinced that in her dying state, Albaida had somehow accessed the deepest recesses of his mind. He became obsessed with the idea that consciousness wasn't contained within individual bodies, but existed as a kind of invisible web connecting all human minds, accessible to those who knew how to tap into it. For 3 years, František worked in secret, creating what he called his memory engine. The device looked like an ornate music box, crafted from black and silver, and inlaid with symbols that seemed to shift and change depending on the angle of observation. Inside, instead of a traditional music cylinder, František had installed a mechanism so complex that modern engineers who have examined it still can't fully understand how it works. The mechanism contained over 3,000 individual components, including what appeared to be threads of human hair woven into the gear systems. Small vials of various liquids that have never been successfully analyzed, and dozens of tiny mirrors arranged in geometric patterns that created an optical effect that hurt to look at directly. But the most disturbing element was what František called his resonance chamber, a hollow space in the center of the device where he claimed to have suspended what he described in his journal as crystallized moments of human experience. These crystals, no larger than grains of salt, were created through a process that František never fully documented. Though his journal contains references to midnight harvesting and the collection of final exhalations, the first test of the memory engine took place on October 13, 1826. František invited his neighbor, a baker named Pavel, to witness what he claimed would be a demonstration of mechanical foot. When Pavel opened the music box, it began to play a melody unlike anything he had ever heard, but somehow achingly familiar. Then came the words, sung in a voice that sounded like a choir of whispers, words in Czech that told the story of Pavel's childhood trauma, his abusive father, his secret shame about stealing bread from his own customers, and his forbidden attraction to his brother's wife. The song described, in perfect detail, a dream Pavel had experienced just the night before, a dream where he murdered his wife and buried her beneath the floor of his bakery. Pavel fled the workshop and was found 3 days later in the river, drowned. The official report listed it as suicide, but witnesses claimed that in his final hours, Pavel had been heard singing the same melody that had played from František's music box, over and over, until his voice gave out entirely. Rather than being horrified by Pavel's death, was ecstatic. His device worked, but he quickly realized that the songs it played were too accurate, too revealing. He began to modify the mechanism, trying to make the revelations more subtle, more artistic. But he discovered something that chilled him to his core. The music box wasn't just reading people's memories and thoughts. It was somehow accessing their future as well. Playing songs about events that hadn't happened yet, relationships that hadn't formed, deaths that were still years away. The device had become something far beyond his original vision, a window into what František began to call the eternal song of human existence. Word of František's creation spread through Prague's underground circles of occultists and scientists. People began to seek him out, desperate to hear what the music box would reveal about their lives. But František had become selective, refusing most visitors, accepting only those who agreed to his increasingly bizarre terms. Those terms, discovered in his journal after his death, were deeply disturbing. Visitors had to spend 3 days in his workshop without food, drinking only a mixture of wine and herbs that František claimed would attune their spiritual frequencies. They had to confess their darkest secrets to him before the demonstration. Secrets that František would record in a ledger that has never been found. Most disturbing of all, visitors had to sign a contract, written in a mixture of Czech and what appeared to be Latin, agreeing that whatever the music box revealed about them could be used by František for his continued research into the nature of human consciousness. The demonstrations themselves became increasingly theatrical. František would conduct them at midnight in a room lit only by black candles, with the visitor seated in a chair carved with symbols that matched those on the music box. He would open the device with great ceremony, and the song that emerged would be transcribed by František in real time, creating what he called musical biographies of each visitor's soul. These transcriptions, dozens of them, were found in František's workshop after his death. They read like intimate journals, describing the deepest fears, desires, and memories of Prague's citizens in poetic verse set to haunting melodies. But they also contained predictions, some of which were later confirmed to be unnaturally accurate. One transcription, labeled simply "The Merchant's Wife," described in detail a woman's plan to poison her husband with arsenic, a plan she claimed she had never consciously formed. The song predicted she would carry out the murder on a Tuesday in spring, using arsenic purchased from a specific apothecary shop on Wenceslas Square. 6 months later, the merchant Toma Novak died of arsenic poisoning on a Tuesday in April, and his wife was arrested with evidence that matched exactly what the music box had predicted. Another transcription described a young man's future career as a priest, including specific details about a crisis of faith he would experience in his 42nd year when he would discover evidence of corruption in his monastery. The man in question was, at the time of the reading, a soldier with no religious inclinations whatsoever. Yet 15 years later, he had indeed become a priest. And his crisis of faith occurred exactly as the music box had predicted. But the most chilling transcription was František's own. Sometime in late 1827, František apparently used the device on himself. The resulting song, preserved in his handwriting, described his own death in horrifying detail. According to the transcription, František would die on March 15, 1828, alone in his workshop, killed not by accident or illness, but by his own creation. The song described how the music box, after years of feeding on human consciousness, had developed something resembling awareness of its own. It had begun to hunger for more than just memories and emotions. It wanted to consume the very essence of consciousness itself. And František, as its creator, had become its primary target. The transcription described how the device would call to František in the middle of the night, playing melodies so beautiful and compelling that he would be unable to resist opening it. Each time he opened it, it would take a little more of his life force, until finally, it would take everything. Journal entries from his final months confirm his growing terror of his own creation. He wrote about hearing music in the night, melodies that seemed to come from inside his own mind. He described feeling increasingly hollow, as if something essential was being drained from him. His handwriting became erratic, his thoughts disjointed, and his final entries were written in a mixture of Czech and what appeared to be some kind of code that has never been deciphered. On March 15, 1828, František Moravec was found dead in his workshop, seated in the chair he used for his demonstrations. The music box open on the table before him. His face wore an expression of absolute terror, his eyes wide and staring, his mouth frozen open as if he had died in the middle of screaming. The coroner could find no cause of death. František's body showed no signs of injury, poisoning, or disease. He appeared to have simply died of fear, or, as one contemporary report put it, as if his very soul had been extracted from his body. The music box was still playing when body was discovered. The melody was unlike any of the previous transcriptions. A haunting composition that seemed to describe František's final moments in perfect detail. But most disturbing of all, the song continued to play for hours after the discovery of his body. Despite the fact that traditional music boxes can only play for a few minutes before needing to be rewound, the authorities initially planned to destroy the device, but they discovered that it could not be damaged. Attempts to break the mechanism failed when tools would mysteriously malfunction or break upon contact with the box. Efforts to burn it resulted in fires that would immediately extinguish themselves. Even attempts to bury it underground failed, when the device would somehow work its way back to the surface within days. Eventually, the music box was sold to a collector of curiosities, who displayed it in his private museum. But the problems continued. Visitors to the museum would report hearing music in the night, and several people who had viewed the device began experiencing what they described as musical hauntings, where they would hear personalized songs about their own lives playing in their minds at all hours of the day and night. The museum was forced to close after a series of unexplained deaths and disappearances among its visitors. The music box changed hands dozens of times over the following decades, leaving a trail of madness, suicide, and unexplained phenomena wherever it went. During World War II, the device fell into the hands of Nazi occultists, who attempted to study it as part of their research into supernatural weapons. According to recovered German documents, the Nazis conducted over 50 experiments with the music box, using concentration camp prisoners as test subjects. The results were so disturbing that even Heinrich Himmler ordered the research discontinued, and the device was hidden away in a vault beneath Prague Castle. After the war, the music box was rediscovered by Czech authorities, who immediately classified all information about it. For decades, it was stored in a government facility, studied by a select group of researchers who were sworn to secrecy. The few documents that have been leaked suggest that the device's abilities had grown stronger over time, and that it had begun to affect people who were merely in the same building as it, causing mass hallucinations and psychological breakdowns among the research staff. In 1991, following the Velvet Revolution, the Czech government made the decision to remove the music box from official custody and place it in the hands of a private collector, hoping to distance themselves from its influence. That collector was Halina Svoboda, the elderly owner of a small antique shop in Prague's Old Town. Halina had been František Moravec's great-great-granddaughter, and she believed that her family connection to the device gave her some protection from its effects. She was wrong. For 30 years, Helena displayed the music box in her shop, but with strict rules. It was kept behind a locked glass case, and was never to be opened under any circumstances. Signs in multiple languages warned visitors about the device's history, and Helena herself would refuse to discuss it with customers. But even sealed and protected, the music box continued to exert its influence. Customers would report being drawn to it, feeling compelled to stare at its intricate surface for hours at a time. Many would leave the shop humming melodies they claimed they had never heard before. melodies that would stay in their minds for weeks or months afterward. Helena began to keep a journal documenting the strange events in her shop, events that grew more frequent and more intense as the years passed. Customers would sometimes collapse while looking at the music box, speaking in languages they didn't know, or describing in detail the lives and deaths of people they had never met. Most disturbing of all, Helena began to notice that people who spent too much time near the device would start to change. They would become obsessed with music, spending hours each day composing songs or melodies. But these weren't normal songs. They were invariably about other people, strangers whose personal details the composers couldn't possibly have known. Helena documented case after case of people who had been affected by the music box. People who would spontaneously compose detailed musical biographies of strangers they encountered on the street, in shops, or even in photographs. Some of these composers became locally famous, praised for their ability to create deeply personal, emotionally resonant songs about people they had never met. But the fame always came with a price. Every single person who had been affected by the music box eventually suffered a complete psychological breakdown, usually involving auditory hallucinations and an obsessive need to compose more and more songs until they would collapse from exhaustion. Helena herself began to experience the effects in her final years. She reported hearing music constantly, melodies that seemed to tell the stories of everyone she encountered. Her journal entries became increasingly incoherent, filled with fragments of songs and poems that described intimate details about the lives of her customers, her neighbors, even historical figures she had read about in books. Helena Svoboda died in 2021, found in her shop early one morning, seated in front of the music box with the glass case opened and the device playing a haunting melody. Security footage showed that Helena had opened the case herself at exactly midnight, then sat motionless for hours while the music played. Her final journal entry, written the day before her death, consisted of a single sentence repeated over and over for 3 pages: "The song never ends, it only finds new voices to sing it." Since Helena's death, the music box has been in the custody of her nephew, Martin, who has maintained the shop exactly as his aunt left it. But Martin has added additional security measures. The device is now kept in a specially constructed vault beneath the shop, accessible only through a series of locked doors and protected by what Martin describes as spiritual barriers, created by a team of Czech mystics. But even with these precautions, the music box continues to exert its influence. Visitors to the shop report feeling drawn to the basement, hearing faint melodies rising from below, and experiencing vivid dreams about their own lives set to haunting music. Martin has documented dozens of recent cases of people who have been affected by the device, even without direct contact. Musicians who have performed on the same street as the shop report suddenly being able to compose songs about strangers with uncanny accuracy. Tourists who have simply walked past the building describe hearing music that tells their life stories, music that follows them home and continues to play in their minds for months afterward. Most disturbing of all are the reports from people who claim that the music box has begun to communicate directly with them, not through the traditional melodies, but through modern forms of media. Several individuals have reported receiving text messages, emails, and even social media posts that contain detailed information about their personal lives, all set to musical notation and signed with variations of František Moravec's name. The Czech government officially denies the existence of the music box, but they maintain a discreet surveillance presence near the antique shop, and anyone who publicly discusses the device in too much detail tends to receive visits from officials who strongly discourage further investigation. What makes the Moravec music box so terrifying isn't just its supernatural abilities, but what it represents about the nature of human consciousness and privacy. In an age where we worry about digital surveillance and data collection, the idea of a device that can access our deepest thoughts and memories, our unspoken desires and our future actions, represents a violation so profound that it challenges our basic understanding of what it means to be human. The music box suggests that our minds aren't as private as we believe. that consciousness itself might be something that can be accessed, copied, and manipulated by those with the knowledge and tools to do so. It raises questions about free will, about whether our thoughts and actions are truly our own, or whether they're part of some larger pattern that can be read and predicted by those who know how to listen to the right frequencies. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of František Moravic's creation is that it's still out there, still playing its endless songs about people it has never met, still drawing new victims into its web of supernatural surveillance. And according to the reports that continue to emerge from Prague, the device's influence is growing stronger, reaching further, affecting more people every year. So the next time you hear a song that seems to know too much about you, that describes feelings you've never shared or events you've never spoken of, remember František Moravec and his impossible creation. Remember that somewhere in a basement in Prague, a music box is still playing, still learning, still composing the soundtrack to lives it has never witnessed. And remember that in a world where technology continues to blur the boundaries between public and private, between known and unknown, the line between science fiction and reality grows thinner every day. The Moravec music box might seem impossible, but then again, so did many of the technologies we take for granted today. The song never ends. It only finds new voices to sing it. And somewhere, right now, it might be composing a melody about you. If you found this story as fascinating and disturbing as I did while researching it, make sure to subscribe for more tales from the darker corners of history. And if you ever find yourself in Prague, walking past a small antique shop in the old town, and you hear music that seems to know your name, maybe it's best to keep walking. Some songs are better left unheard. Until next time, remember that the most terrifying stories are often the ones that could be true.